I'm Jane Edge, the Chief Executive of CBM Australia. In this COVID crisis, CBM is on the ground in some of the poorest places on earth. We urgently need your help to provide our partner hospitals with protective masks and gloves, and to deliver emergency food and hygiene kits, including soap, to those who are most vulnerable, people living in poverty with disabilities. Please take a few moments now and donate at cbm.org.au. Thank you so much for your support.
We at Story Strategist are helping organisations embrace new technologies and tell more engaging stories. I've had the privilege of leading teams for some of the world's most innovative companies, enabling media technology. This includes the Connect 20 Online Media and Art Summit. We've responded rapidly to an opportunity to represent an online summit when a conference was not possible. If you'd like help building an appropriate media solution, then I'd love to hear from you.
Hello from Sydney, I'm Mel Wade.
And from Auckland, I'm Luke Weston, and our next guest is Dr. Robbie Sondereger. Dr. Robbie is an internationally recognised clinical psychologist, known for taking psychology from the front line to the home front. As an expert consultant in people systems over the past 15 years, Dr. Robbie has worked with corporations, governments, churches, universities, schools, and humanitarian agencies in more than 25 countries, Mel.
Wow, and we are super thankful to have Dr. Robbie, given how highly sought after he is as a keynote speaker, having presented to more than 1.5 million people worldwide over the past decade.
And Mel, we have him for not one, but 2 sessions over the summit as well, which is so cool. Well, these sessions from Dr. Robbie are titled The Sweet Spot, and this first in the series is about tapping into the slipstream of creativity. Here's Dr. Robbie Sondereger.
Well, wherever you might be tuning in from, I hope and pray that you have been enjoying Connect 20, the Media and Arts Summit here online. And I certainly am greatly honored and privileged that I get to share both the session today and tomorrow around your theme of Renaissance, which of course means rebirth or the resurgence of creativity. And since I'm guessing that most of you who are tuning in are creative nuts, well, maybe you've got a couch handy because you might want to lie down on it during this session. We might do a bit of psychoanalysis and see what makes you really tick. And not only that, but how can we get you to tick even better? How can we have that resurgence of creativity in our own lives? And what an amazing time to be able to talk about this theme, none other than in the midst of a global pandemic where we seem to be locked down, twiddling our thumbs, but that right there could be, once again, the birthplace of creativity. My wife and I, we are both clinical psychologists, and we've worked in various different places around the world, predominantly in war zones and natural disaster areas, increasingly these days with survivors of human trafficking. But we are equally as passionate about taking psychology from the front line and bringing it to the home front. Because sometimes we listen into our neighbour's apartment or we look over the neighbour's fence and it looks like a war zone or a disaster zone over there too. In other words, we all need great quality life skills to be able to do life really well. And doing life really well is not just the absence of bad stuff, but rather it's the input of good stuff. The challenge is with creative types, all too often we can be touching heaven on Sunday and be completely falling apart on Monday. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. You're the kind of individual, right, who's a bit of a late night owl, a little bit chaotic, a little bit crazy, and you think, no, you've got to understand, like, my mess is the inspiration for my genius. It's not actually true, and we'll get to the reason why that's not true. In fact, organization is the birthplace of creativity, so we might have to shift gears a little bit around that. But no doubt, you're like me, where you'll come up with a brilliant idea at kind of like 10:30 at night. And then you go, well, I can't go to bed because like my mind is racing now, so let me go and pursue that idea, whatever it might be. If you're a music artist or a digital artist or any kind of creative person, you'll pick up that guitar and you'll start strumming out the chords as you're trying to figure out, write down, yeah, I got that tune, I got that melody, I got the lyrics going. I'm like, yeah, this is great. By 3 a.m., You kind of think to yourself, like, I'm on the final strings now, the final bit I'm putting just the fine-tuned touches on this song. This is a great song. This is going to be a winner. Hands down, best song I ever wrote, until you wake up in the morning and you listen to it and you go, what was that all about? In other words, we can have these moments of creative genius, and in the morning, we are our worst critic as we appraise and evaluate just what we have done. And the reason why we don't find it so well is, well, because at 1 o'clock in the morning, while we might think that we are in the slipstream of creativity, no, we're just highly energetic. Our mind is racing. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing our best work at that time, even though we might be convincing ourselves that we are. So I want to unpack a couple of ideas today that might actually help you become even more creative, to have a resurgence or a rebirth in your creativity. As I mentioned, we've worked in various different places, and in one of the very, very first trips my wife and I took, we were in Africa, in a country called Uganda, and we thought to ourselves, let's experience some like authentic culture. And so we saw a sign, this Wednesday night at the Sheraton, a cultural night. And we're like, we don't want to go to some touristy thing. We want to see the real deal. Like we want to go into the bush and see how they sing and how they dance. And so we took ourselves off to a local church service. And I tell you, it was everything that we anticipated it to be. The rhythm and the dancing and the drums, and it was just like that you would expect, from hundreds of years ago. Nothing had changed. It was just authentic, creative rhythm and artistic prowess on display. That was until one gentleman got up in front of the audience and said, and now we will have a song and dance from our Mzungu, which means white people, brother and sister all the way from Australia. And I looked at my wife, she looked at me, I'm like, wait, say what? What did he just say? We got to sing. I can't sing. Can you sing? I can't. No. And so they ushered us up to the front of the audience, and we're standing there like two stunned mullets. Now you got to understand, this is going back like 20 plus years. We came from completely different backgrounds. Like, I didn't know any church songs that she knew. And she came from a much more conservative church background where they sung, hymns, and she didn't know any church songs that I knew. And I'm like, what are we going to do? And I don't know. And one gentleman in the audience, to try and encourage us, starts going like this. And pretty soon, everyone starts clapping and everyone's dancing to this beat, except for the two white people at the front who can't dance or can't sing for that matter. And I don't know what happened, but from deep within came this little tiny voice. Once a jolly swagman camped by a billabong, and my wife chimed in with, under the shade of a coolabah tree, and we busted out this rustic rendition of Waltzing Matilda. Now, thank God, no one had any idea what we were singing about, but they loved it. Now, were we singing about the Saviour? No, if you think about the lyrics of the song, we're singing about some homeless dude who steals a sheep and kills himself at the end of the song so he doesn't get arrested by the state troopers. And so not what you would expect to sing in a church, but we were living by the principle of make a joyful noise. If you live by facts and you're always trying to fit into the mold of what's expected, a church song, well, sometimes it just doesn't work. But when we sing from our heart and we participate in the culture at some level, amazing things can happen. I wonder what experiences you've had like that, where you've, in the moment of panic, stepped outside of your comfort zone, outside of the sphere, outside of the square, and managed to experience a resurgence of creativity. If we're going to talk about creativity, in fact, let me go ahead and write it on the board here, creativity. There's something that you need to understand, and that is that for the most creative geniuses throughout history, all too often, they had one thing in common. That was that they were just like a sandwich short of a picnic, like a stubby short of a six-pack. Like there was just something not quite right. In other words, they could paint a masterpiece in a single night or write a symphony and then cut their ear off and post it in the mail. Like, what's up with that? It seems as though when it comes to the theme of creativity, there is a fine line between creativity and crazy. Now, not that I'm suggesting you're crazy, but you will have appraised yourself in that way from time to time when you woke up in the morning and reflected on the work that you were doing at 3 a.m. And you go, what was I thinking? Like, this is awful. Like, this is no good at all. And you start to question your own faculties. Now, I say there's a fine line between creativity and crazy, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to stay in the mad lands. We could actually stay in the slipstream of creativity. But how? You see, most of us, if we are creative types, we will absolutely know what this slipstream feels like. We have passed through it on occasion, on our way up to madness. And then we came back down, we spent a bit of time here, and then we came back down. On the other side of mad is sad. This is where we review how good our work was. We become our own worst critic and we're not very happy with it. And so I try again and I get creative, and then I go, oh yes, 3 o'clock in the morning, spike. And then I kind of review it in the morning and I come down to the other side. Now, don't worry, this shape is quite healthy. It's called a heartbeat. It's this one you need to worry about. It kind of denotes that you're dead. So look, it's okay to have highs and lows. The challenge with creative types is that sometimes our highs are just a little too high, and our lows, particularly Monday morning, are just a little too low. Begging the question, how do we spend more time in the slipstream of creativity? There's a particular verse that I've been chewing on today, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 10. Actually, it's one of my all-time favorites. It kind of says, if the axe is dull and one doesn't sharpen the edge, well, then you have to use more effort or more strength. But wisdom brings success. And what's the wisdom? Well, to sharpen the axe, of course, because a sharp axe requires less effort. Wouldn't it be great if we were to be able to apply that particular verse in the area of creativity in our lives, where with less effort, with minimal effort, I could actually enter into the slipstream and stay in the slipstream of creativity and come up with amazing creative work that truly is worthy of the title masterpiece. But in order to do that, we need to understand how this works a little bit. So I'm going to turn this into a bit of an XY graph so that you understand the process involved. On the one end, on the vertical bar, we've got this thing called passion. This is where we got really excited about the song that we were writing, that we started at 10:30 and we ended at 3 a.m. We were super passionate about it. But if we are passionate without some kind of reflective process, in other words, thought, critique, analysis, introspection, without being able to properly review it, if we only have a little bit of reflection and lots of passion, we'll end up somewhere out here in the Madlands. However, if we have too much reflection, too much introspection, too much critique on our work, and not enough excitement or passion for it, well, once again, we'll end up somewhere out here in the sad lands. Now, there is a border on each side, and the border is critical. It's the one that says, I'm going to appraise my work. But also, there's a flip side, and that is when I'm starting to get passionate at 12 a.m., I start to become productive. That's where I get to write the entire symphony in one night. Like, I am busting out some amazing work when I'm on the slipstream of creativity. But if I step over that line, then it just becomes crazy. Or if I step over that line, I become too critical, then I just get depressed. So staying in the slipstream of creativity requires us to have equal portions of both passion and reflection. I know it's great in theory, but what we're talking about here is positioning. In psychology, we understand that if you are well positioned, you will tap into purpose. You'll have the why for whatever it is that you are creating. All too often we pursue the what first before we even engage the why. So for example, if you've got a great idea to do something, it's a brilliant idea, well, I need money, which is my what. So I go in search of or chasing after the finances to fund the project, but that would be a little bit like putting the cart in front of the horse, should I say. Because the principle is that purpose precedes provision. We observed this to be true ourselves when working one year in Zambia. We were doing a leadership training program for a bunch of community members who were each taking a turn at being the leader. And one of the challenges that we had before us was, well, how do we actually build, as leaders, medical infrastructure in this community? The nearest medical outpost was a 3-day walk away. And this was emphasized to us when midway through the leadership training program, one of our members passed away from cerebral malaria. And so once again, begging the question, what has been done? What skills, assets, resources, opportunities do we have to build a medical center right here in our own community? And the community came along and said, we've got plans. We've got, all these plans designed, architectured, beautiful drafted, beautiful looking building for a medical center for the community. But they needed all this money. And so they have been applying. I'm like, how long have you been applying for money? And they said, 10 years. I'm like, well, how much have we raised? And they said, nothing. I'm like, what, not even $1? No, nothing. 10 years of asking people for money to build the building that they needed. So then we asked the question, what would it take? In fact, how long would it take? Like just one person, like just one guy after work to make just 10 building blocks. They use a special clay and they fire them in a kiln, and these building blocks, they do stand the test of time. So how long would it take just one person who knew what they were doing to make just 10 of these building blocks? And the answer was about half an hour or so. And then we asked another question, so how long would it take like 10 people to make 10 of these building blocks after work of an afternoon? And they discussed it among themselves and realized, that's a trick question. It's the same time, about half an hour or so. And then we asked the question, so how long would it take 10 people making 10 building blocks every day after work before we actually had enough building blocks to build our own clinic? And when they did the math, they realized that the answer was only a matter of months. And how long had we been applying for funding? Anyway, on our last day in the village, to cut a long story short, one gentleman came up as he was saying goodbye, pass greetings to your family in Australia as you leave. And by the way, I just wanted to let you know, I just made 10 bricks. This gentleman, the entire community rallied around him, and within the space of 1 year, the entire community had not only built enough of these, or made enough of these bricks and burned them, but they built a state-of-the-art medical center. And then the World Vision came along and said, who built this center? And the community said, we did. And so World Vision said, well, this is really impressive. What we'll do is we'll put iron sheets on the roof so to make sure that the building survives the rain seasons in the years to come. And then the government came along, the health department, and said, who built this building? And the community said, we did. We got sick and tired of waiting for you to do your job, so we just did it ourselves. And then the government said, but don't you know, if you've got a medical center, well, you need medicine. And then you need appropriately qualified staff to dispense that medicine. So what we will do is we'll build 2 houses, station 2 nurses there, and stock it full of medicine. It's almost like that philosophy, if you build it, they will come. Or put it in another way, purpose precedes provision. But the equation is not complete on its own. It's not just that purpose precedes provision, but rather it's that positioning precedes the purpose that precedes the provision. We have to become well positioned if we are going to turn this into an opportunity. When I say opportunity, think of it like this. This shape looks a little bit like a baseball bat. And on a baseball bat, just like a cricket bat, there's this phenomena called the sweet spot. The sweet spot is right about here. So if you are able to hit the ball on the sweet spot, you'll hit it out of the ballpark pretty much every time. And the same is true in our lives. There is a mathematical formula that I like to refer to as the sweet spot. It allows you to tap in to peak performance. Let me explain it to you like this. If you're a busy person, chances are lots of people ask you to do lots of things. Why? Well, because if you want something done, give it to a busy person to do. Why? Because they get stuff done. And the problem is we've got a glass that's already quite full. And so when other people come along and they say, hey, can you do that? That'd be great. Now, if you're a creative type, chances are the church will be like, hey, we need you on we need you on Easter, and then we need you on Pentecost, and then we need you for the women's conference, and then we need you. And all of a sudden, we are so full up, and we are so busy, and then somebody comes along and says, hey, can you help us out? And we say, help you. I need help. I'm so full up. I need somebody to take my load, and so you pursue leadership. You think, I'm going to delegate some of my tasks. I'm going to become a leader in this moment. I'm going to share some of my load. And so this is what you do. You take your load and you try and pass some of it on to another. So you position it right over the top of that other individual. And do you notice something? Not a single drop is going into its intended destination until the glass reaches 85 degrees. Let me explain it. A glass that is more than 85 degrees can't pour properly. A glass that is less than 65 degrees can pour, but it can't be refilled while it's pouring. So here's the principle. The sweet spot is always typically between 65 and 85% of everything in your life. In psychology, we recognize if you are more than 85% busy, you are unproductive or ineffective, should I say, as a leader. And of course, if you're less than 65% busy, well, then you're unproductive. So in order to tap into the sweet spot, we've got to make sure that we are not too busy and busy enough, making sure that we have the capacity, just like the glass. When it's 85% on an 85-degree angle, I can actually pour effectively. And as I refresh others, I too am in the right pouring position to be refreshed. Over the next day or two, can I just challenge you? Stop, reflect, ask yourself, what are the areas in my life that I probably need to step up a little bit in? And what are the areas in my life that I could probably reduce a little bit in to make sure that I too can enter into the slipstream of creativity and hit it out of the ballpark every single time.